The second house represents the material values that we have, and it's very important to all of us. So the thing is, how do we create the second house? What kind of karma actually has made the second house in our own chart as we have it? So the answer to that is in the third house, past life. So third house, previous life, was the one that actually has created whatever we see nowadays as the second house. And what does it mean? So that's the way of thinking in a previous life is causing the effect in the material values nowadays. So it's like our thoughts are manifesting anyway, but it usually takes one life to do that. So because if we are looking from the 12th house point of view, nowadays the second house is actually the third house. So that means what kind of energy we leave in the third house becomes the second house nowadays in this life. Generally, if we used to have very negative thoughts, like if we were very angry or full of negative kind of thinking, maybe even worries, too much of it, that's what we manifest. That's how we create our second house nowadays. This is the way how we earn the things. And we can just quickly go and check how did we actually get different kind of signs. So this is like the first understanding of how one sign on a cusp of that house was created. And of course, we have many more details there. Maybe we have certain planets there. The ruler of the second house is placed in our chart in one way or the other, but generally speaking, how do we create a certain sign there? So let's say if we have an Aries on the cusp of the second house. Nowadays, it could represent different things. One of the things is we get money always through some new thing. Yes, and if this is the reality in our chart because of how the Mars is placed and maybe some other things, so the action that actually caused that was the very fast, positive thinking, the way of thinking that we would always be quick to open to some new options, to new possibilities. It was never depressive kind of thinking. It was very oriented toward new options, new ideas, new possibilities, and proactive way of thinking. Of course, if we have in our natal chart Mars challenge, and then we read that actually money doesn't go that easily to us. So the question is, how did we create that? Usually that challenge Mars would represent that the very same kind of thinking process was in a previous lives. That would mean like we could have been angry, saying very negative kind of things to other people and all that stuff. So that kind of thinking manifests very hard earning options in this life. One thought becomes a particle in the next life. So this is the process of it. If we have a Taurus in the second house, we usually say, yeah, that's a very good sign to be there, because Taurus typically collects and it has. So it's usually very positive for material values. But what kind of action was created in a previous life to cause that kind of thing? So usually that thinking on a very positive way, like I want whatever is fruitful. I don't want to waste my time of thinking on things that are not positive or like fighting. No, let's see what can we actually make out of it. Let's think on a very reasonable and a very stable way. So it's not like a genius way of thinking, but it was very positively oriented, very practical. So that practicality actually collects and it works very well. So this is another thing of it. And let's say if we have a Gemini on the third house, so usually nowadays we can say, oh yeah, that would mean different things. Maybe we are good in trading, so that's the kind of thing, so we get money to trading, or maybe traveling, or also we can say our financial situation is changeable. That's all possibilities. All that will depend on Mercury position, because Mercury rules Gemini, maybe certain planets we have there, but generally the action that caused that consequence to get a Gemini on the second house cusp is the very clever way of thinking. It was very intelligent person, so basically very good in see different things. Sometimes by manipulating things we can get something. So nowadays it can be, depending on the action we did, it can be very good for trading, or sometimes it can be very changeable. It was not very stable way of thinking. We could change sides. We could, one day we could think one way, and then another day we could say, oh, no, nowadays I change my mind, I think differently. The result of it in this life would be our financial situation is very changeable. Now, this is one thing. If we have a very good positive Mercury in this life, and it actually tells us that the very fact that the Geminis are under the second house cusp, we basically earn money through travelings. We travel a lot, and that's how we get. Okay, so the way of thinking in a previous life was much more toward thinking on new things, on travelings in your mind, reading a lot, having many information that could actually help us to get that state of mind that we wanted to have. So we would travel in our mind through different books or different things. So nowadays we travel and we get money. That's one option, but the key point is to understand the link between thinking process and manifesting result of it. Those two things are interconnected, usually through two lives. And of course, in some cases, some people are capable even think in this life and manifest in this life. This is also possible, but that requires a little greater state of consciousness to achieve that. But in the regular way, this is the way how it goes. So if there is a Cancer on the second house cusp, usually our financial situation nowadays comes through a family. We get some money through our family, or our finances depends on our family situation. It also can be that our mother can help us, support us financially, etc., etc. Of course, it can be sometimes very positive, very good for us, and in some other cases, it can be not so great sign. But it all depends what kind of karma that we did in previous life regarding that. That would emphasize that the way of thinking was always through our family, that we were thinking very much about our family. We would put a lot of efforts to understand the needs of our family, or that everything we think was through the filter of our family needs. That's the mindset that one would create in that time. So nowadays, his financial situation depends so much on family situation. Whatever the family is giving him, he gets there. So if the way of thinking was very positive, he could achieve a very positive income nowadays, and very good. It would work very well. If it was not so positive, then the problem with that can also happen. So depending on emotions we put in our thinking process, because whenever we have a Cancer and the way of thinking, we actually involve our emotions into the thinking process. So sometimes it's very good if the emotions are very positive. So we get like a poets, we get people who knows how to think positively, and that way, from that gentle way of thinking, they actually easily earn the money, they get the best. It actually manifests through their feelings. They feel and nicely and think nicely on that basis, and that's how they manifest. So, but if moon is challenged in a chart, we typically say, no, the person was very moody, so to say, in the previous life, in the way of thinking. So it was usually not really good way, or the person would be worrying too much or something. So nowadays it shrinks its possibilities to earn the money. So this is one thing how we could actually create. So we just need to check the situation with the moon and all that, and then we could understand the reason why one actually has that or this financial situation. In case we have a Leo at the second house cusp, usually it's a very good one, because with a Leo we usually have a tendency to think on a very bright way. It's usually bright way of thinking. We are positive in what we know, what we want. And this is the most important thing. See, with the Cancer on the third house cusp, you never know if the person knows what it wants, or maybe it knows better what it doesn't want. Because if you know what you do not want, that's what you're gonna get. But with Leo on the cusp of the third house in the previous life, yes, that would actually emphasize, yeah, we know what we want. We want these positive things, and usually it's very good for financial situation. Unless someone has a sun in challenged aspect, in challenged situations. If the sun is challenged, then the person was thinking through its own ego. So it was more like, oh, I want to show off. Always thinking how to present myself better than I actually am, or always trying to present best of yourself. But sometimes it can be exaggerating, and then the person would actually have a very non-giving, open way of thinking, but rather like a ego show-off way of presenting itself. That kind of mind is not producing a lot. So then in this life, the person will have a feeling that the value of itself, the value of the person itself is greater than he gets. So he could feel that it's never enough. He's supposed to get more, but he does not. Other people do not understand how valuable he or she is. So that's kind of thing that can happen if you have a challenged sun or the second house challenge, depending whatever we have there. But generally, Leo on the second house cusp is a usually very good sign for developing. If you have a Virgo on the second house cusp, that means that the Virgo was the way how we would think in a previous life. So we would be thinking through Virgo style, which means we analyze, we are very clever. It's usually very, very practical, and it can be very good in anything. Nowadays, if you have a Virgo in the second house cusp, it could emphasize that you earn money through work you do, because Virgo represents that. If you were a person who is capable of analyzing everything and see every single detail, but at the same time was not capable of seeing the greater picture, that would tell us that you manifest less, because Virgo never tells about abundance. Virgo is typically a story of small things. So there you can have a people who can get small just because the way of thinking was not big enough. So that can be an issue. It all depends on the planets we may have in Virgo, or the ruler of the second house, which would be Mercury in this case, and its own position. If that was very good, person was very clever, very practical, and was capable, of planning, of thinking how to develop the things, and in this life, this person will get its own money or even wealth through work person does. And if we have a Libra at the second house cusp, usually in this life we get money through different kind of relationships. It can be marriage, it can be partnership, any kind of partnership could include that, or sometimes through very beautiful, nice things, easygoing. All depends on Venus. However, if it was not really well placed, either we don't have a nice position of any planet in the second house, in the Libra, or Venus is afflicted, we may see that the person misused the way of thinking in a previous life through the sign of Libra. Usually, through the sign of Libra, we have a tendency to develop a balanced way of thinking, which is good. That would actually help us to develop, to manifest balanced way of income in this life, or through relationship. It would work nicely, it could work. But if Venus or Libra is afflicted somehow, person was thinking of how to manipulate another person, like how to do something so that I can get some use of other people and like that. And then in this life, the issue on material level could be with the partner. So they could fight, and one can lose money due to other person he or she is involved with. This is, again, how did we earn that? So what to say if someone has a Scorpio on the second house cusp? Scorpio is usually like a vacuum cleaner. Scorpio attracts everything and it comes to it. So that's why it usually is very good for developing a wealth, true wealth. This is typically for Scorpio. But of course, it will depend on different things, like how do we what do we get? How did we use the previous life? How did we think through Scorpio? Because once you know how to think through Scorpio, you can manifest abundance. But unless you learn that, you can really manifest many things you don't want. Because usually through Scorpio, souls who are not very experienced, when they start thinking through that, they can see everything in a negative way, and they can start even hating different things and like that. So if one was using its own mind that way, whatever he manifested is a fight. It's not a happy one. So nowadays, the result of it would be that one must fight for some money. So that money coming through him is not very happy. People are fighting about it very much with the others. Sometimes Scorpion, the second house cusp, can emphasize the inheritance, that we inherit money through family or through someone or like that. And sometimes people fight about it. Sometimes they don't. Again, it depends on other factors. But if we really knew how to think through Scorpio in previous life, that would mean that we would go deep. We would be deep thinkers, very clever, very deep. Never negative, but very deep, going deep into psychology of everything. So that's the quality of Scorpio, understanding the things that are deeper than the surface. And if you can get that depth would create abundance here, because whatever is very deep there, it's like a seed that we plant, and the abundance will happen. It's like investing. Our thinking in a previous life is like an investment that's actually manifesting now. Any kind of very deep thinking, very deep insights about any reality. Deep insights that are typically positive, that are typically good, that we see at the bottom of any reality, good things. So this is the seed planting. And out of that seed, we will receive abundance in material way. If you have a Sag on the second house cusp, it may emphasize very good, very positive way of manifesting things. Things are coming through whatever is big or whatever is related to foreign countries or some education, depending on whatever we have here. So, but the thing is, the way of thinking, our mental state in previous life typically was very optimistic, positive way of thinking. We see things positively, generally speaking. So this is the way how we do it. And if we see that positively, we easily manifest. It supports us. Of course, Jupiter will tell us most of it, but Jupiter is usually working for us. So if you have a Jupiter nicely placed in a sign, aspects, those kind of things will tell us what kind of thinking that was in a previous life that will manifest as abundance, pure abundance in this life. It's usually a very good one. So it might be a person was teacher, was thinking about the education, educating other people, giving a knowledge to the other people. Nowadays, we can expect to earn money from many foreign countries, working with people who are coming from abroad. This is one way, or we can also expect to get the money from publications. We can be publishers, and that's also one way of getting money. And the third way, it could be through pure traveling. We can travel, we can live abroad, we can go somewhere and also manifest our things. If there is a Capricorn on the second house cusp, sometimes it represents the need to save money in this life. It's usually not the sign for abundance, but of course it will all depend on the Saturn. Why is that so? Because the mental state of a person in previous life was very conservative. This is the way of how we think through Capricorn. Sometimes very pessimistic, especially if it was pessimistic way of thinking. We cannot expect some great material values in this life. It will be struggling. It can be struggling. So as much as the pessimism was the way of thinking of a person, dominant way of thinking of a person in previous life, that's how little person can earn in this life. But on the contrary, if the person was thinking in a way that it was very serious, but with the plans, like I'm creating a plan, I'm never rushing to get anything, so I just think on a very structured way. Those kind of people will get and will manifest things through time, because anything which is structured in one way manifests through time in another life. Those two things are important, and we need to check that, especially if the Saturn is very well placed with Jupiter. That's something that would emphasize that the time will work for a person here, but this is because that was a person who was very stable, very structured, very organized thinkers, scientific way of thinking. Because if we have a Jupiter trine Saturn in this life, yeah, money comes to us through time. But in previous life, the way of thinking was very academic, with the proofs, standard. It gives a result through time. If we have Aquarius on the second house cusp in this life, we can expect unexpected, meaning we can get many things, we can manifest many things unexpectedly. We just buy a lottery and we get something, or we gamble, or we do something unusual, something new, out of very new things, not like anything in standard. Whatever is new, whatever is trendy, we can get it. We can get it fast. So this is the thing, how it works. But of course, some people can lose all they have, also equally unexpected. It will depend on planets we have in the sign of Aquarius and the ruler of it. Here we must check both rulers, Saturn and Uranus, in order to understand that. But the karma who created that is the way of thinking of a person in previous life. So if the person was really like a genius in previous life, yes, in this life person will manifest anything through new things, like new ideas. I will have ideas that I manifest, and my ideas are literally manifesting into anything, into abundance. I get that idea. But it all started in previous life with those genius way of thinking, out of box thinking. But if on the contrary person was more like rebellious, constantly fighting with the others, being opposite to whatever someone says and like this, so that's also a way of Aquarian thinking. So in this life, many opposite things of what person wants can happen, can manifest in material value. So the person would think, oh, I invest money here into something new, but then you lose the money just because there is this opposite tendency to be opposite from a previous life. So this is how we put one action there, we got the reaction as manifestation in this life. And the last sign would be Pisces on the cusp of the second house. Pisces are typically, we say, they are not so much connected with the money, with all this. So this is like not Pisces thing. However, when we are thinking about the way of thinking, Pisces do not represent the sign of thinkers, because Mercury is not very strong in the sign of Pisces, traditionally, unless Mercury is a diver. If you know how to dive deeply and to actually be present under the water, then you develop a very special kind of thinking, which is not like a regular swimmer. In some cases, if that was a regular person, we say Pisces in the second house person is not really aware of its values or how to earn money. Money is just going out through his fingers. He's simply not having enough. It's just going somewhere. He's not even aware of it. It can be like that because in previous life, person was not really thinking much. It was more like a dreaming kind of a person. In some cases, we could have a person who would use his Pisces to cheat other people. So if it was a cheating or a lying or saying something, which is not true, nowadays it manifests as, again, you can guess. You can get robbed, people can lose your money in one way or the other. So this is, again, the consequence of it. Of course, we could have a situation where the person was very spiritual, very open, totally spiritual way of thinking, or an esoteric way of thinking, that kind of deep, but finding secret meanings of life. Person could easily manifest anything it feels. Whatever we want, we easily get. We dream and we get it. It goes that easily without any fight. That means through art, So we have our visions and we manifest through our art, or even doing something else that we like, but we do it with ease, without any fight, totally easy. And we manifest basically whatever we have as our dream, or sometimes even beyond our dreams. It all depends on the quality of thoughts we produced in a previous life. So basically, what is important from all of this is to understand that there is a wave part of us and there is a particle part of us. Wave part starts from a previous life and the particle is in this one. And the most significant way to understand that process is just happening between the third house in a previous life and the second house in this one, because it directly represents the process of manifestation.